The pen felt cold and heavy in my hand. A ridiculous thought. Really, it was just a pen. A sleek, black Mont Blanc that probably cost more than my first car. But right now, in this sterile, over-air-conditioned conference room at Hargrove Associates, it felt like I was holding a lead weight. Right there, on the final line, Mrs. Sterling, Will's lawyer, David Carson, said. He didn't bother to mask the impatience in his voice. He'd been billing by the hour for this 15-minute spectacle. It was Rachel Bennett now, or it would be, the moment this was done. But I didn't correct him. Let him have his little power play. I let my hand tremble, slightly, as I brought the pen down. The signature came out wobbly, weak, perfect. And we are concluded, Carson announced, gathering the thick stack of papers with a satisfied rustle. He slid a copy across the polished mahogany table toward me. As negotiated and agreed upon, the apartment on Mercer Island, the 2022 Porsche Cayenne, and the sum of $250,000, constituting a final settlement in lieu of any further claims against the Sterling marital estate or future earnings of Mr. Sterling. He made it sound like a fortune. It was pocket-lint to a man like William Sterling III. The apartment was in my name already. A wedding gift from his parents he'd never liked. The car was leased. The money wouldn't cover 2 years of my mother's care at the old rate. Will was keeping the house in Medina, the yacht, the portfolio, his controlling interest in Sterling Medical Group, and, most importantly, his pristine reputation. Will, seated across from me, finally spoke. He'd been silent, watching me with the detached interest of a scientist observing a lab specimen. You look tired, Rachel. His voice was smooth, concern expertly painted over the granite beneath. The same voice that had once whispered promises in the dark, that had sold me a fairy tale built on a foundation of lies. It's been a long 3 years. Will, I said, keeping my eyes downcast, tracing the embossed letterhead on the divorce decree. My voice was a soft thread, barely there. Well, he sighed, a performance of weary magnanimity. It's over now. You can move on. Find some simpler life. It's what you always claimed you wanted, wasn't it? Before you got used to the nicer things. Carson chuckled, a dry, papery sound. I said nothing. The silence stretched, uncomfortable for them, nourishing for me. Will stood, adjusting the cuff of his custom Tom Ford suit. The afternoon light from the 40th floor window glinted off his platinum Rolex, a trophy from his father for his first big merger. The merger that had used my father's patented valve design as its cornerstone. I do hope Eleanor is comfortable, Will said casually, as if mentioning the weather. My mother's name in his mouth was a violation. The palliative care wing at UW Med is top-notch, for as long as the funding lasts. Of course. I looked up then, meeting his ice-blue eyes. I let the fear I didn't feel show in mine. The funding, it's part of the agreement. You promised. For her lifetime. He smiled. It was a cold, thin curve of the lips that never reached his eyes. Promises made in the context of a marriage. Rachel, the marriage is dissolved. The ancillary understandings reconsidered. Carson was packing his briefcase, deliberately not looking at us. He knew what was coming. He'd probably helped draft the move. What are you saying? I whispered, pushing back from the table, the chair screeching softly. Will pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't dial. He'd had the number ready. He tapped the screen and put it on speakerphone. The ringtone echoed in the quiet room. A brisk female voice answered. Mr. Sterling's office. Amanda, it's Will. Connect me to the administrator for the Sterling Family Charitable Fund at UW Medical Center. Immediately. Right away. Sir. More ringing. My heart was pounding, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. Real fear. Now, not for my mother. Marcus had assured me she was already secure, but that he wouldn't take the bait, that he'd show a shred of decency at the last second and ruin 3 years of meticulous planning. A man's voice came on the line. Peter Jansen speaking. Mr. Sterling. A pleasure. Peter, listen carefully. Effective immediately. I am terminating the Sterling Fund's special coverage for patient Eleanor Archer. Room 714. In the Advanced Neurocare Unit. All payments cease as of noon today. You are to inform the attending physicians that the experimental protocol L7 is no longer funded. Any outstanding balances are to be invoiced to Ms. Rachel Bennett at her address of record. If payment is not arranged well, you have your standard protocols for non-paying patients. Do you not? The man on the phone hesitated. Sir, protocol L7 it's stabilizing her condition. An abrupt cessation could lead to a rapid. That is not my concern. Peter, we'll cut him off. His voice hardening. The decision is made. Execute it. Today. His eyes were locked on mine, drinking in every flinch, every ragged breath I forced myself to take. Yes, sir. Understood. Will ended the call. The silence that followed was absolute, swollen with his triumph and my feigned devastation. You see, Rachel, he said softly, placing the phone on the table. This is the real world. The world without my protection. That protocol costs $40,000 a month. The apartment is worth maybe $2 million. After taxes and your modest earning potential. How long do you think you can keep mommy alive? I stared at him, my mouth slightly agape. I felt the blood drain from my face, a genuine physiological reaction to the sheer, unveiled cruelty of the act. I wrapped my arms around myself, shrinking into the chair. Why? The word was a broken thing. Because I can, he said, simple and brutal. Because after everything you've cost me, the embarrassment, the constant neediness, this feels appropriate. A final settlement, if you will. He took a step closer, leaning on the table, his face inches from mine. I could smell his Creed cologne. You'll come crawling back. In a week, maybe 2, when the money runs out and the hospital starts talking about discharge to some county hospice. You'll beg. And you know what? I might reconsider. If you beg convincingly enough. Carson cleared his throat. William, we really should be. In a minute. David, Will said, not breaking eye contact with me. I want to remember this. The moment Rachel Archer finally understood her place in the world. The old name. The name I was born with. The name he'd convinced me to trade for his. A transaction disguised as love. I let a single, hot tear track down my cheek. It was the finishing touch. I saw the flare of satisfaction in his eyes. He'd won. He'd broken me. He straightened up, brushing a non-existent speck of dust from his sleeve. Goodbye, Rachel. It's been educational. He turned and walked out of the conference room, Carson scrambling after him with the precious signed documents. The door clicked shut behind them, leaving me in the silent, expensive tomb. I didn't move for a full minute. The tremor in my hands, which had been partly real, partly staged, stilled completely. I wiped the tear from my cheek with the back of my hand. The gesture slow, deliberate. The performance was over. I stood up, my movements now smooth and assured. I walked to the window, looking down at the dizzying view of downtown Seattle. The city looked small, a model laid out beneath me. 3 years. 3 years of smiling at his friends, of playing the dutiful wife at interminable charity galas, of nodding while he explained my own father's work to investors as if I were a child. 3 years of quietly accessing files, of wearing a bug in my necklace to board meetings, of memorizing passwords whispered in post-argument exhaustion, of pretending his casual cruelties chipped away at my spirit instead of forging my resolve into something harder than steel. He thought he'd just won. He thought he'd delivered the final, crushing blow that would send me spiraling into helpless dependence. He had no idea he'd just sprung the trap on himself. From my purse, a simple leather tote. Not one of the designer pieces he'd bought me, I pulled out a cheap, prepaid cell phone, a burner. I powered it on. It had one number programmed into it. My fingers, steady and dry, typed out a message. Phase 1 complete. He took the bait. Initiate Phase 2. I hit send, then removed the SIM card. I walked to the sleek, modern bathroom attached to the conference room, ran the water, and bent the tiny chip until it snapped. I flushed the pieces down the toilet. I splashed cold water on my face, looking at my reflection in the mirror. The woman, staring back, had hollows under her eyes, lines of stress that hadn't been there 3 years ago. But her gaze was clear, sharper than it had ever been. The ghost of Rachel Archer, the idealistic, trusting woman Will had married, was gone. What remained was something else. Someone who had seen the abyss and decided to build a bridge across it, using the stones her enemy had thrown at her. I walked back into the empty conference room, picked up my copy of the divorce decree, and slid it into my tote. My hand brushed against the other phone inside that MY real phone. I ignored it for now. My mind drifted back, not to the good times, because there had been so few, but to the moment the scales had fallen from my eyes. It was about 8 months into the marriage. The shine had worn off. Will was working later, his trips to conferences more frequent. I was lonely in the cavernous Medina house, worried sick about my mother, who had just been diagnosed with a rare degenerative neurological condition that had no cure, only a staggeringly expensive experimental protocol to slow its progression. Will had swooped in, a knight in shining armor. Don't worry about a thing. Darling, we're family now. Sterling Medical will cover everything. The best care for the best woman in my life. I believed him. I was drowning, and he was offering a lifeline. My father was gone. My sister Chloe was a struggling actress in New York, and I was a junior graphic designer making 55 grand a year. I had no way to help Mom, so I took his hand. I married him in a spectacular society wedding that felt more like a corporate merger. That night, I couldn't sleep. Will was in D.C. Supposedly, I went downstairs to get water. His study door was ajar, a sliver of light cutting across the dark hall. I heard his voice. He was on a late call, his tone sharp, commanding, utterly unlike the charming persona he showed the world. The Archer valve is the key. The clinical trial data is problematic. But the FDA doesn't need to see the full picture from the Munich cohort. Bury it. Our submissions will highlight the Boston results only. A pause. He was listening. I don't care about the attrition rate. Paul, if the device fails in 5% of patients after 18 months, that's a cost of doing business. A profitable one. The patent is airtight. Thanks to my late father-in-law. God rest his soul. And my wife is blessedly unaware of its technical nuances. Another pause. A low laugh. Sentiment. Don't be ridiculous. The old man was a brilliant engineer, but a terrible businessman. He left his family exposed. I'm just consolidating assets. And ensuring Eleanor Archer's continued comfort is a small price to pay for Rachel's ongoing compliance. Just keep the Munich files encrypted and off the main server. I stood frozen in the shadowed hallway, the cold from the marble floor seeping through my socks and into my bones. The words swirled around me. Problematic data. Bury it. Attrition rate. Cost of doing business. My father's life's work. His name. Reduced to a problematic asset. My mother's care. A small price for my compliance. The man I'd married was a stranger, a predator, and I was the prize he'd begged, along with my father's intellectual property. I backed away silently, returned to our massive, cold bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed until sunrise. That was the night Rachel Sterling died, and the woman who would destroy William Sterling was born. The memory faded, leaving me back in the present, in the quiet lawyer's office. I took a deep, cleansing breath. The air still felt tainted with his presence, with Carson's smug superiority. It was time to go. I left the conference room, nodded politely to the receptionist who gave me a look of pity she couldn't quite conceal, and stepped into the elevator. As it descended, the weight of the performance finally lifted from my shoulders. The helpless ex-wife was a costume I could now hang up. For a little while, at least, the elevator doors opened into the sleek lobby. I walked out into the gray Seattle afternoon. A light drizzle was falling, misting the air. I didn't mind the rain. It felt clean. Instead of heading for the parking garage where my now former Porsche sat, I turned and walked down the street. I walked 2 blocks, then 3, the drizzle matting my hair to my forehead. At a bus stop, I stopped. I pulled out my real phone and dialed a number from memory. It was answered on the first ring. Status? The voice on the other end was deep, calm, grounding. Marcus Thorne. It's done, I said, my voice low. He did exactly what we predicted. Made the call. In front of me, on speaker, a soft hum on the line. I could picture Marcus in his book-lined study in San Francisco. A slight nod of satisfaction. The recording from your bag. The one we planted for just this charming gesture? Active and clear. I confirmed. Got every word. Execute it. Today. I mimicked Will's cold tone. Good. A nice, clean piece of evidence demonstrating intent and immediate threat. It will pair beautifully with the financial coercion argument. Adds a visceral layer to the dry fraud charges. He paused. How are you? Rachel? I'm fine. Marcus. And for the first time in a very long time, it wasn't a lie. Relieved. The first mask is off. The hardest part is over. The play is now in motion. He believes you're cornered, desperate, and alone. That's when arrogant men make their worst mistakes. I heard the rustle of papers. Jenna confirms the bait files are already being accessed. His team took the hook the moment you left the building. They're scrambling. A grim smile touched my lips. Jenna, our tech savant. She'd set up a digital honeypot, a fake, encrypted drive that appeared to contain damning financial records. It was designed to be found, to be hacked into, and every attempt to access it would lead Will's people down a rabbit hole of our design, while giving us a map of their capabilities and contacts. Phase 2 is live. I said, indeed. Come home. Rachel, your mother is asking for you. She's comfortable, and she's very proud of her daughter. The word home struck me. For 3 years, home had been a gilded cage. Now, it was a safe house apartment in Queen, and that Marcus had arranged, where my mother was currently resting under the care of a discreet, expensive, and fiercely loyal medical team paid from an untraceable account. I'm on my way, I said. I ended the call and hailed a taxi. As the car pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the soaring glass tower that housed Hargrove Associates. Somewhere in its upper floors, Will was probably celebrating with Carson, a glass of 25-year-old Macallan in hand, believing he had finally put me in my place. Enjoy the taste of that scotch. Well, that I thought, watching the building shrink in the rain-streaked window. It's going to be the last good thing you have for a very, very long time. The taxi merged into the downtown traffic, carrying me away from the past and into the carefully constructed battle of my future. The game was on, and for the first time, he wasn't the only one making the rules. 3 years earlier, the rain in Seattle felt different. It wasn't a cleansing mist, it was a gray, persistent shroud, matching the inside of my skull perfectly. My father, Robert Archer, had been dead for 6 weeks. A sudden coronary at his lab. The will was read. The patents and the modest proceeds from the sale of his small biomedical firm were now mine and my sister Chloe's. The emptiness he left was a physical ache. Then, the second blow landed. Ms. Archer. The results are conclusive, Dr. Evans said, her face a mask of professional sympathy that didn't reach her tired eyes. It's Degas-Crevette syndrome. It's progressive, attacking the central nervous system. There is no cure. I stared at the MRI scan images on her light board. White lesions scattered across my mother's brain like stars in a cruel constellation. Options? My voice sounded small, like a child's. Management. Palliative care. There is an experimental protocol. ESET. It's shown promise in slowing neural degradation in a small cohort. It's extremely expensive, not covered by standard insurance. We're talking $30,000 to $40,000 a month, minimum, for an indefinite period. The number hung in the air. My share of Dad's estate was substantial, but not bottomless, not against a tide like that. I felt the floor tilt. I was 28, a graphic designer with a good eye and a middling salary. Chloe was in New York, waiting tables and going to auditions. We were adrift. Rachel? The voice was familiar, warm, laced with concern. I turned. William Sterling stood in the doorway of the consultation room. He looked like a GQ ad misplaced in a hospital. Tailored charcoal coat, perfect jawline tight with apparent distress. Our families moved in loose, wealthy Seattle circles. His father, William Sterling Jr., had tried and failed to buy my dad's company years ago. Will and I had exchanged pleasantries at a handful of charity events. He'd been charming, smart. I'd been dating a music teacher at the time. I'd barely given Will a second thought. Will, what are you? I heard about Eleanor, he said, stepping fully into the room, nodding respectfully at the doctor. My father is on the board here. He mentioned it. I'm so sorry. His gaze landed on me, blue eyes soft with a compassion that seemed to physically warm the sterile room. I had to come. I couldn't imagine you facing this alone. Dr. Evans, sensing a private moment, murmured something about giving us time and slipped out. The dam I'd been holding up broke. A sob escaped me. I covered my face with my hands. In an instant, he was there, his arms around me, his coat smelling of cedar and money. Sure, it's going to be okay. I promise you, Rachel, it's going to be okay. I wanted to believe him, desperately. He took me to a quiet cafe. Over coffee I didn't taste. He listened. He listened as I poured out my grief for my father, my terror for my mother, my financial fears. He didn't offer platitudes. He offered solutions. The L7 protocol. UW-Med is one of 3 sites running it. The lead researcher, Dr. Chin, sits on the Sterling Medical Advisory Board. He leaned forward, his hands cradling his cup. Let me help. Not alone. A gift. For your father. He was a good man. A brilliant man. The medical world lost a giant. Let me do this in his memory. I shook my head. Numb. Will, I can't, it's too much. We're not. You don't owe me anything. Friendship, he said simply, his eyes locking onto mine. I know we haven't been close, Rachel, but I've always admired you. Your strength, your loyalty to your family. This is what my resources are for. To help people. To help you. It was the beginning. The carefully laid first stone. He became a constant. Flowers arrived from my mother's room. A specialist from Johns Hopkins was coincidentally in town and gave a second opinion at Will's request. He handled the intimidating hospital administrators with smooth, confident calls. The crushing burden lightened. Just a fraction. One evening, a week later, he took me to dinner at Canlis. The city glittered below us. He didn't talk about my mother. He asked about me, my art, my dreams, my father's work. He was so passionate about that valve design. I said, a little wine loosened, said it could change outcomes for thousands. He just hated the business side. Will nodded thoughtfully. A common flaw in geniuses. They see the ideal. The world deals in the practical. Sterling Medical could have helped him navigate that. Given his vision the platform it deserved. He sighed, a hint of regret. My father's failure to convince him to partner is one of his few professional regrets. The conversation felt deep, meaningful. He saw me, not just as Robert Archer's daughter, but as Rachel. 2 months in, the gifts became more personal. My crappy apartment lease was up. I have a place on Mercer Island, he said casually, just sitting there. It's too big for me. You and Chloe, when she visits, could use the space. Consider it a temporary base, rent-free. It's the least I can do. I moved in. The temporary arrangement blurred. He'd visit, bring dinner. We'd talk. He was funny, sharp, and his concern for my mother seemed genuine. He'd get updates directly from Dr. Chen before I would. The night he first kissed me, the rain was sheeting down the windows of the Mercer Island condo. I'd been crying, overwhelmed by a bad day with my mother's progressing symptoms. He held me, wiped my tears, and his lips met mine. It felt less like passion and more like a life raft. I clung to it. I'm falling for you, Rachel, he whispered against my hair. I know the timing is insane, but I can't help it. Let me be your rock. Let me take care of you, of Eleanor, permanently. The proposal, when it came, was a logical extension. We were at his family's Friday Harbor estate. His parents, William Jr. and Celeste, were courteous, if distant, over champagne. His father clapped him on the shoulder. Your young lady comes from good stock. Will, strong legacy, smart to consolidate. Will smiled, a private joke in his eyes I didn't understand. He turned to me, down on one knee on the expensive Persian rug. Marry me, Rachel, not just for you and me, for your mother. As my wife, she'll be family. Sterling Medical will cover everything for her. For life. No more worries. No more bills. Just a future. It wasn't I love you. It was I will solve your problems. In my exhausted, terrified state, it was the most romantic thing I'd ever heard. I said yes. The wedding was a society page fairy tale. Chloe was my maid of honor, radiant but with a watchful, uncertain look in her eyes she couldn't quite hide. You sure, Rach? She'd whispered as we got ready. It's all so fast. He saved Mom. Chloe, I'd said, conviction masking my own flickering doubts. He saved us. The first crack appeared on the honeymoon in Bora Bora. A call came for him. Some urgent merger issue. He took it on the terrace, his voice low, tense. When he came back, the charming mask was back, but it was slower to settle. Business. He'd shrugged. It never sleeps. But enough of that. He never asked about my day. Back in Seattle, the rules began, subtly at first. That friend of yours, Lisa, he mentioned one night, scanning my phone as I cooked. The one who's always posting about those political protests. Sterling Medical has contracts with the state. It's unwise to be closely associated with that kind of activism. For both of us, I stopped seeing Lisa. My job at the small design firm became a point of contention. You're working late for peanuts. He'd say, it's beneath you. You're a Sterling now. Your time is better spent on the foundation board. It looks better. I quit. My world shrunk to the house, charity galas, and hospital visits. The money was next. My inheritance, from my father's estate, was sitting in a managed account. Let me have her guy look at it. Will said, diversify. You're too heavy in those old tech stocks. I can get a much better return. I signed the papers he put in front of me, trusting, grateful. A year in, I was a well-dressed ghost in a gorgeous house. My mother was stable, on the L7 protocol, housed in a beautiful private room at UW-Med. Will was a rising star at Sterling Medical, lauded for integrating innovative legacy technologies. My father's valve was their new flagship product. I should have been happy. I was numb. Then came the night of the Hamilton merger. Will was in a foul mood. The deal was hitting snags. He drank heavily at dinner, something rare for his controlled self. He snapped at the server, criticized the wine. At home, he stormed into his study, slamming the door. I brought him a glass of water later, an olive branch. The door was slightly ajar. I heard his voice, slurred with whiskey and fury. The Munich data is a goddamn anchor. Paul, I don't care if 15% of the subjects showed rejection symptoms after 14 months. Bury it deeper. The FDA cleared us based on Boston. The Boston data is clean. Mostly. A pause. I stood frozen in the hallway, the cold glass sweating in my hand. The Archer valve is a gold mine. Will's voice continued. Lower now. Vicious. A fucking gold mine my sentimental idiot of a father-in-law was too scared to capitalize on. He wanted more testing. Testing costs money. We're making money. Another pause. A harsh laugh. No, she has no idea. Thinks it's magic. Thinks a magic for keeping her mommy alive. It's a manageable expense for absolute control. Just make sure the Munich files are in the Black Archive. No one looks there unless they already know what they're looking for. The glass almost slipped from my hand. I backed away silently, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Munich, rejection symptoms, Black Archive, manageable expense for absolute control. The pieces, the kindness, the rescue, the marriage, the IT all crystallized into a terrible, brilliant, monstrous picture. He hadn't saved me. He'd acquired me. He'd acquired my father's patent. My mother's life was the retainer fee for my silence, for my compliance. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room, watching the lights of the city. The numbness was gone, burned away by a cold, clarifying rage. He thought I was a pawn, a pretty, passive asset on a balance sheet. He was wrong. The next morning, I waited until he left for work. I went to a library across town. On a public computer, I created a new, encrypted email account. I spent hours researching. Sterling Medical, FDA submissions, my father's patent number, and I found him. Marcus Thorne, my father's old friend, his lawyer for the first company he'd started, a man my father had called, with affection and respect, the last honest man in a Shark Tank. He'd retired to San Francisco after a storied, combative career. I drafted an email. Dear Mr. Thorne, you don't know me, but I am Robert Archer's daughter, Rachel. I believe my husband, William Sterling III, is using my father's valve design in an unethical and possibly illegal manner. I believe he married me to gain control of it. I need your help. I stared at the screen for a long time. Hitting send would be the point of no return. It would mean admitting I'd been a fool. It would mean war with a powerful, ruthless man. I thought of my mother, alive because of his blood money. I thought of my father's legacy, being used to hurt people. I thought of the man in the study, who saw lives as line items. My finger clicked the mouse. The reply came faster than I expected. 2 lines. Rachel, I've been waiting for this email. Call this number. Use a payphone. The game, my game, had begun. The taxi dropped me at a nondescript brick building in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood. The sign read Neptune Dynamics Data Solutions. It was a front, and a good one. Marcus had set it up 2 years ago. A fully operational IT consulting firm that served real clients. Its real purpose was 2 floors below street level. I bypassed the receptionist with a nod, used a key card on an unmarked door, and descended a flight of concrete stairs. The hum of server racks grew louder. The space below was cool, dimly lit, and looked like something from a movie. Multiple large screens, workstations, a wall covered in notes, photos, and timelines. Welcome back from the front lines, a voice said. Jenna Chin didn't look up from her bank of monitors, her fingers flying across 3 different keyboards. She was in her late 20s, hair in a messy bun, wearing a hoodie from a defunct cyberpunk video game. Status? I asked, shedding the last vestiges of the broken woman from the lawyer's office. My shoulders straightened. He's panicking, elegantly, but it's panic. This came from Leo Walsh, the former FBI forensic analyst. He was in his 50s, with a close-cropped beard and the calm, assessing eyes of someone who'd seen every kind of crime. He stood at a physical evidence board, a red string connecting a photo of Will to a document labeled Project Ether. I walked to the central table. He made the call. On speaker. Marcus has the audio. Perfect. Leo said, direct coercion establishes motive for the financial pressure we're about to apply. He tapped the board. We've been busy while you were playing damsel in distress. Sterling Medical's offshore billing shell game is fully mapped. We have the pipeline from the Caymans to the Zurich account. Show me the patient, I said. My voice was flat. Jenna swiveled in her chair. With a few clicks, she brought up a file on the main screen. It was a medical record. Name redacted. Subject from the Munich trial cohort. Implanted with the Archer generation, 1 valve. Presented with severe inflammatory rejection 18 months post-op. Record shows unrelated infection as cause. Internal memo from Sterling Medical's risk assessment team. Obtained via a not-so-secure server in their Hamburg office. Says otherwise. She pulled up the memo. The word probable device failure was highlighted in the risk matrix. The recommendation. Settle quietly. NDAs. Purge primary records. A cold, not tightened in my stomach. This was no longer about me, or my mother, or a stolen patent. This was about people who trusted a device with my father's name on it. How many? I asked. From the Munich data we've reconstructed, at least 17 documented adverse events. 5 deaths coded as underlying condition progression. Leo said quietly, the Boston trial data they submitted to the FDA, clean as a whistle. It was a different patient demographic. Shorter follow-up. They cherry-picked. I absorbed this. The rage was there, but it was a cold. Focused fuel now. Evidence chain. Forensic. Leo said, we have the original, unaltered trial databases from the Munich server before they were archived. Timestamped, with digital signatures. We have the FDA submission packets, side by side with the source data, showing deliberate omissions. We have the financials showing payments to the principal Boston investigator that far exceed standard consulting fees. And Will's direct involvement. This was the linchpin. His lawyers would try to pin it on underlings. Jenna grinned, a flash of white in the dim light. Oh, he's elbow deep. She pulled up an email chain. The sender was Westerling at sterling.com. The recipient was Paul Ryerson, head of regulatory compliance. The subject, Archer Valve EU data. The text was succinct. Paul, Munich results are a liability. The Boston data is our path to market. Ensure the submission reflects only the positive narrative. The board expects seamless approval. Handle the discrepancies. Vous. He never says destroy or falsify. Leo noted, legally, he's insulated, but in context, with the financial trail and the outcome, a jury will see it, especially, he added, when paired with his little performance today, shows a pattern of ruthless cost-benefit analysis. People are just line items. So we have fraud. We have bribery. We have conspiracy to defraud the FDA. We have wrongful death implications. I summarized. What don't we have? An actionable, immediate crime that gets him cuffed now. Jenna said, the white-collar stuff takes years. He'd be out on bail, with an army of lawyers. The whole time, he'd come after you. Your mom, Chloe. That's where phase 2 comes in. Marcus's voice came from the staircase. He descended, looking like a professor in his tweed jacket, but his eyes were the sharpest in the room. We have the gun, Rachel. Now we need him to pull the trigger in a way that leaves his fingerprints all over it. I turned to him. The bait is set. Thanks to Jenna's artistry. Marcus nodded. We've seeded the dark web rumor mill with hints of a disgruntled Sterling ex-employee sitting on a gold mine of internal data. We've let a few low-level forensic accountants stumble upon traces of the hidden Munich server. The pressure on Will internally is building. His stock is riding high on the Archer valve success. Any whiff of scandal, and his board will eat him alive. I finished. So he's desperate to find and eliminate the source. Precisely, Marcus said. He believes the source is you, a desperate ex-wife with nothing left to lose. He expects you to try to sell what you know, or to blackmail him. He's waiting for it. So, we will dangle the possibility. How? You'll go dark. For a week. No contact. Let him stew in the mess of his own making with your mother's very public discharge. Which, by the way, our friends at UW-Med will politely decline to execute, citing humanitarian protocols, infuriating him further. Then, you'll surface, frayed, desperate. You'll reach out to an intermediary he trusts, or more accurately, one he controls, with an offer. You have files. You need money. For your mother's new, even more expensive treatment. And he'll see it as a trap. I said, but his arrogance will tell him it's his trap to spring. He'll think he can corner me, get the files, and then have me arrested for extortion. Or something worse. Leo said quietly, desperate men don't always think about the law. They think about permanent solutions. A silence fell over the room. That was the risk. We were poking a predator. He won't get physical. I said, more to convince myself. He's too careful, too image-conscious. He'll try to outsmart me legally. He'll bring in his lawyers, record the meet, try to get me to name a price. And we will be recording everything from your end. Jenna said, tapping a tiny, almost invisible device on the table. Newest Gen audio and video. Picks up through fabric. Battery lasts 48 hours. We'll have a full tactical team on standby, courtesy of some private security friends of Marcus's who don't like guys who mess with medical data. Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. This is the pivot. Rachel, we move from gathering evidence to provoking the confrontation that makes the evidence undeniable. Are you ready? I looked at the screens, at my father's name next to red failure warnings, at Will's damning email. I thought of my mother, safe in a clinic he didn't know about. I thought of the call he'd made that morning, so casually cruel. He told me I'd come crawling back. I said, my voice steady, let's make sure he's right, just not in the way he expects. I picked up the tiny recorder from the table. It was lighter than the pen I'd used to sign my divorce, and infinitely more powerful. Hargrove's bar was all dark wood and subdued lighting, a place for discreet conversations. I sat in a corner booth, fingers tracing the condensation on my glass of sparkling water. I looked the part, slightly frayed blazer, minimal makeup, eyes that kept darting to the entrance. A woman on the edge, right on time. A man in a perfectly cut suit slid into the booth opposite me. Lawrence Hargrove, not Will's divorce lawyer, but his other lawyer, the one who handled special projects. He had the calm, unreadable face of a man who'd seen every kind of sin and billed for it. Ms. Bennett, a pleasure, under the circumstances. His voice was a low murmur. Mr. Hargrove, did he send you, or did you volunteer? I asked, letting a tremor enter my voice. A faint smile. My client is a concerned party. The events of the last week, the unfortunate media speculation, it's created turbulence. He'd like to see it settled. Settled, I repeated, letting the word hang. I took a shaky sip of water. My mother was almost put on the street. There's a human interest piece running on King 5 tomorrow. How does he want to settle that? Hargrove placed a slim, expensive phone on the table between us. The piece has been killed. A significant donation to the station's charity foundation. A misunderstanding with the hospital has been corrected. Your mother's care at her new facility will be covered. A one-time grant. Anonymous. Of course. I stared at him. Why? Because Mr. Sterling is not a monster, despite what you may believe. He regrets the heat of the moment. The divorce was acrimonious. People say things. He leaned forward slightly. But this tit for tat in the press helps no one. It's beneath you both. It's not tit for tat, I whispered, leaning in as if sharing a secret. It's survival. The money from the settlement, it won't last. The new clinic, the treatments, it's more. I have obligations. Hargrove's eyes sharpened. A predator catching a scent. Obligations can be renegotiated. My client is a reasonable man. If there are other pressures, perhaps he can assist. I let a flash of panic cross my face, then looked down, fidgeting with my napkin. It's not that simple. Make it simple. Rachel. May I call you Rachel? He said, his tone shifting to one of faux concern. What is it you really need? A lump sum to secure Eleanor's future? To ensure your own comfort? Name it. Let's end this cycle of unpleasantness. This was the moment. The hook. I looked around nervously, then back at him, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I have things. From the house. From his study. Files. Digital files. Things people would pay a lot for. Things that could cause a lot of that turbulence you mentioned. Hargrove didn't move a muscle, but the air in the booth changed. The pretense of conciliation evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating focus. What kind of files? I shook my head violently. No, I'm not stupid. I say what's in them, and they're worthless. I just know. I know they're valuable. To the right buyer, a competitor, the press, maybe. I was rambling, playing the desperate amateur. Selling proprietary information is a federal crime. Rachel, espionage. You could go to prison for a very, very long time. His voice was a steel cable. What's the alternative? I shot back, a flare of defiance. Watch my mother die because I can't pay? I'm already in a prison. I took a deliberate, steadying breath, as if regaining control. I don't want to sell them. I want him to buy them. From me. One time. Enough to make me go away forever. Then he never has to worry about who else I might talk to. Hargrove studied me for a long minute. I could see the gears turning. This was what they expected. A shakedown. A sloppy, desperate shakedown. You're talking about extortion. He said flatly. I'm talking about a transaction. I insisted, voice wavering. For assets, I came into possession of during the marriage. A final division of property. He can call it whatever he wants. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. I will need to discuss this with my client. He will, of course, require proof of these assets. A sample, to verify their value. I nodded jerkily. I can do that. A small sample, nothing identifying, just enough to show I'm not bluffing. How do we proceed? I'll be in touch, I said, sliding out of the booth. I left a 20 on the table, my hand visibly shaking. Tell him to think about a number. A big one. I hurried out, feeling his eyes on my back all the way to the door. He bought it, I said, slumping into a chair in the Neptune Dynamics war room. The adrenaline was draining, leaving me hollow, or he's pretending to. He bought it, Jenna said from her console. She spun her monitor around. It showed a complex network map. A pulsing red line was active. The sample I prepped for you? The encrypted file with the doctored Munich trial headers? The second Hargrove's phone touched their secure server to download it. I was in. They're scrambling. Their entire digital security team is on it, trying to trace the origin of the file, trying to crack the encryption. They're pulling in outside contractors. Nasty ones. Leo nodded, studying another screen. And they're digging into your life. Deep. Your old apartment records. Your mother's medical history, pre-will. Your sister Chloe's everything. They're looking for leverage, for where you might have hidden the files. They've also put a physical tail on you. 2 guys, in a gray Ford Explorer. Amateurs. Good, I said, the word tasting bitter. This was the plan. Make them move. Make them show their hand. The more they invade, the more we see, the more they try to trap me, the more rope they give us to hang them with. Marcus, who had been listening quietly, spoke. The sample was perfect. Jenna, just enough tantalizing data to be credible, but with the critical patient IDs and locations scrambled. It will drive Will mad. He'll know it's real, but he won't know how much you have. What's the play with Hargrove? I asked. He'll contact you in 48 hours. Marcus predicted. He'll propose a meet, a safe place. He'll have a number, a lowball offer. He'll also have the place wired, have cops on standby, ready to arrest you the moment you name a price. Classic entrapment, and we'll have our own recording. I said, touching the small pendant around my neck at the new camera, showing I never ask for money, showing I'm there under duress, discussing the return of marital assets, while being threatened. Exactly, Leo said. We turn their trap inside out. The illegal surveillance. The coercion.it becomes our evidence of his malicious intent and his fear of exposure. My own phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. A text. Rachel. It's Chloe. We need to talk. Call me. It's important. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning ran through me. They'd found my sister. Phase 2 had just gotten personal. The text from Chloe was a cold knife in my ribs. We need to talk, not her usual style. No emojis. No, hey sis. Just that stark, demanding line. Will's move. It had to be. He'd found my pressure point, and he was leaning on it with everything he had. My first instinct was pure, white-hot panic. I wanted to call her right then, to scream down the phone that whatever she'd heard was a lie, to tell her to get on a plane and come home now. The maternal, protective part of me that had spent a lifetime looking out for my little sister surged forward, obliterating the cold strategist I'd become. For 3 years, I'd shielded her from the worst of my marriage, giving her vague, reassuring answers. Will's busy. Things are fine. Mom's stable. I'd wanted her to have her dream in New York, untainted by my gilded misery. Now, that protection had failed. They've contacted Chloe, I said, my voice tight. I held up my phone so the team could see the text. Marcus's face went grim. Leo cursed under his breath. Jenna's fingers paused over her keyboard for a fraction of a second before resuming their rapid-fire clicking, her expression hardening. We knew this was a possibility, Marcus said, his voice a low, steady anchor. He's escalating. He can't find the files digitally, and your mother is out of his reach. Chloe is the logical next target. Logical target? I snapped, the fear twisting into anger. She's my sister. She's 24 and trying to make it as a waitress in Hell's Kitchen. She doesn't know anything. She shouldn't be part of this. I was pacing the short length of the war room, my hand gripping my phone like it was a lifeline. The controlled facade I'd maintained for Hargrove, for the world, was cracking. This was the vulnerability I'd tried to bury, the one Will had just found. Rachel, Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Sit down. Think. What is his goal? To hurt me? To make me stop? No. Leo interjected, his analyst's mind cutting through the emotion. His goal is the same, to locate and neutralize the threat. He's applying pressure to a weak point to see what breaks, what information leaks. He'll feed her lies, try to turn her against you, or use her to get to you. Standard divide and conquer. Jenna swiveled. I'm already tracking her digital footprint. Phone records, emails, social. If they've made contact, it's been careful. No obvious traces from Sterling-associated numbers or accounts. Probably a cutout. She glanced at me, her usually impassive eyes showing a flicker of sympathy. You need to call her, but you can't tell her everything. Not yet. She thinks I'm a mess who married a rich jerk and then got dumped. I said, the truth bitter on my tongue. If he's telling her I'm broke, desperate, maybe selling company secrets, she'll believe him. She'll think I've lost it. She'll try to fix it. and she'll walk right into his trap. Then you have to give her enough of the truth to make her stop and listen. Marcus said, but not so much that she becomes a liability or a target of opportunity. It's a delicate balance. The weight of it crushed me. For 3 years, the lies had been a shield. Now, telling a partial truth felt like another kind of betrayal. I looked at Marcus, at the team I'd built in the shadows. They were waiting for my decision. The leader couldn't afford to fall apart. I took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing the panic down, locking it away in the same iron box where I kept my fear for my mother. The Rachel who crumbled was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not now. Okay, I said, my voice regaining a semblance of calm. I'll call her. From a secure line. Jenna, you patch in. Record everything. Leo, be ready to run any names or details she gives me. I went to the sound-dampened booth at the back of the room. My hands were steady as I dialed Chloe's number via the encrypted relay. She picked up on the second ring. Rachel? Her voice was tense, edged with a concern that immediately morphed into accusation. What the hell is going on? I've had people calling me, asking questions. What people? Chloe. What did they say? I kept my voice low, measured. A guy from some family resources firm said he was doing a wellness check because you were involved in a difficult divorce and might be unstable. That you were making wild accusations about Will. Maybe trying to steal from his company to pay for Mom. Her words tumbled out, faster and higher pitched. Then I get this email from an account I thought was yours, but it wasn't. It was all messed up, saying you were in trouble and needed money and not to trust the lawyers. Rachel, what did you do? Did you really try to blackmail him? I closed my eyes. Will's playbook was textbook. Isolate, confuse, discredit, make me look like the crazy, vengeful ex-Chloe. Listen to me. The email wasn't from me. The wellness check was a lie. Will Sterling is not the man we thought he was. Oh, so now he's the villain? She shot back, her New York toughness coming through, masking her fear. After he paid for everything for Mom for 3 years? After he gave you that life? You told me it was amicable. Now I'm getting these creepy calls because you're trying to screw him over in the divorce? Her words were arrows, each one tipped with the poison of the narrative Will had crafted. The big sister who had always protected her felt a surge of defensive anger. But I choked it down. She was scared, and she was reacting to the only story she'd been told. It was never amicable. Chloe, I said, my voice cracking with a real emotion I didn't have to fake. It was a transaction. He married me to get control of Dad's valve patent. Mom's care was the price of my silence. Now that he has what he wants, he's cutting her off. He tried to have her kicked out of the hospital the day we signed the papers. Silence on the other end. Then, a skeptical, that's insane. Ratch, why would he do that? It makes him look like a monster. Because he is, I said, the flat certainty in my voice giving her pause. And because he thinks he can get away with it. He thinks I have nothing. He's wrong. I found things. Chloe, things he did with Dad's design. Bad things. People got hurt. He's not just a jerk. He's a criminal. And you're, what, playing vigilante? The skepticism was still there, but it was wavering, edged with a dawning horror. This isn't one of your graphic novels. Rachel, this is real life. He's powerful. He'll destroy you. He's trying. I said softly, that's why he's calling you. To get to me. To scare me into backing down. You can't talk to these people. Chloe, you can't engage. You have to trust me. Trust you? She cried, her voice breaking. You've been lying to me for years. You let me think you were happy. You let me thank him for saving Mom. Now you're telling me it was all some evil plot. And you're in a secret war with him? How am I supposed to process that? Her pain was a physical ache in my chest. She was right. I had lied. To protect her. Yes. But the result was the same. She felt betrayed. I'm sorry, I said, and it was the most honest thing I'd said in weeks. I am so sorry I didn't tell you. I thought I was keeping you safe. I was wrong, but I'm telling you now. Please, you have to be careful. Don't answer unknown numbers. Don't reply to strange emails. If anyone approaches you, call Marcus Thorne. Do you remember him? Dad's lawyer. Marcus, yeah. I think so, she said, her voice quieter now. Drained. Rachel, are you in danger? I thought of the gray Ford Explorer, of Hargrove's cold eyes, of Will's voice on the speakerphone. We all are, as long as he's free. But I'm not alone. And I'm not helpless. I need you to be smart. And I need you to do something for me. What? Play along. If they contact you again, be confused. Be worried about me. Say I've been sounding paranoid, erratic. Say I mentioned having papers that could ruin Will. But you didn't believe me. Can you do that? Can you feed his arrogance? She was silent for a long time. I could hear the sounds of her city apartment in the background, that a siren, distant music, her world, so far from this shadow war. You're asking me to lie for you, she finally said. I'm asking you to help me trap the man who's trying to destroy our family. I corrected gently, to finish what Dad would have wanted, to protect Mom. Another pause, then a sigh, heavy with resignation and a newfound steel. Okay, I'll do it. But, Rachel, when this is over, we're having the longest, most honest talk of our lives. No more secrets. Tears welled in my eyes, a mix of relief and guilt. Deal. I love you. Chloe, love you too. Just don't get yourself killed. Drama queen. I managed a watery laugh and hung up. I sat in the booth for a moment, forehead pressed against the cool glass, gathering myself. The conversation had been a battlefield, and I felt bruised, but we'd held the line. Chloe was with me. When I walked back into the main room, my face must have revealed the toll. Marcus gave me a slow, approving nod. You did good. You gave her enough truth to anchor her, and a role to play that keeps her safe. It hurt, I admitted. The words raw. It was necessary, Leo said, not unkindly, and effective, if she plays her part. It confirms Will's belief that you're isolated and cracking. It makes you seem more desperate, more likely to walk into his meat. As if on cue, Jenna held up a finger. Speaking of, incoming, scrambled number. But the origin pings to a cell tower 2 blocks from Sterling Medical's headquarters. My personal phone, sitting on the table, buzzed. Not a text, a call. We all looked at it. The air in the room thickened. This was it, the pivot. I walked over, took a final, centering breath, and answered. Hello, Rachel. Will's voice was smooth, confident, devoid of the mocking cruelty from the lawyer's office. This was his boardroom voice. The deal maker. We need to talk. In person. This back and forth through lawyers is beneath us. I let a beat of silence hang, letting him hear my tension. I have nothing to say to you, Will. I think you do. He purred. I think you have something I want. And I have something you desperately need. A mutual solution. Let's discuss it like adults. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. My boathouse on Lake Washington. You remember the way. It was a location he controlled. Isolated. Private. A perfect place for an ambush. Or a carefully staged confession. Why would I come anywhere near you? I whispered, layering fear into my voice. Because if you don't, he said, the steel seeping back into his tone. That worrying email your sister received? The next one will have pictures. Unpleasant ones. And the calls she gets won't be from wellness checks. They'll be from producers who've decided her headshot doesn't match her new reputation. Come alone, Rachel, and bring everything you have. This is your one chance to end this cleanly. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. The fear on my face was gone, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. He'd taken the bait. He'd threatened my family directly. On a recorded line we were undoubtedly capturing. I looked at Marcus. The boathouse. Tomorrow. Marcus's eyes gleamed with a fierce, protective light. Then it's time, he said, to prepare for the final deal. The morning of the meeting dawned gray and heavy, a blanket of low clouds pressing down on Lake Washington. I stood before the floor-length mirror in the safe house bedroom, not seeing the woman in the simple black trousers and cream silk blouse, a carefully chosen costume of vulnerable elegance. Instead, I saw a collection of parts, the wire taped securely along my ribs, the small, flat microphone disc position just below my collarbone, the camera button on my lapel, its lens a tiny, unblinking eye. Jenna's voice echoed in my memory from the pre-dawn tech check. We'll have audio and visual from your POV. The backup team will have thermal and long-range optical from the woods. If he so much as twitches wrong, we're in there. You're not alone. The words were a mantra, a shield. My reflection's eyes looked back, wide and dark. 3 years ago, this woman would have been trembling, nauseous with fear. Today, a cold, crystalline focus had settled in my core. The fear was still there, a live wire in my gut, but it was now a tool. IT sharpened my senses, heightened every detail. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a performance. And I was finally stepping out of the role of the victim and into my own skin. The script was mine. Marcus met me at the door. He didn't offer empty reassurance. He placed his hands on my shoulders, his grip firm, his eyes searching mine. Remember, he needs to believe he's won right up until the moment he's lost. Let him talk. Let him gloat. The more he says, the deeper the hole he digs. He paused. Your mother is safe. Chloe is briefed and safe. Whatever happens in there, you have already protected what matters most. I nodded, swallowing hard. I'm ready. Leo handed me a small, sleek clutch. Panic button is sewn into the inner seam. Squeeze it twice if you need an immediate extract. We'll be listening to every word. The drive to the lake was a blur of rain-slicked streets and evergreen forests. The Sterling family boathouse was a monument to understated wealth. Aged cedar and glass, jetting out over the dark water, isolated at the end of a long, private drive. Will's silver Aston Martin was already there, parked carelessly, as if claiming the space. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic counter-rhythm to the calm I projected. This is it, the final move. I parked my modest rental car next to his behemoth, took a deep breath that did nothing to calm me, and walked to the heavy oak door. It was unlocked. The interior was one vast room, smelling of old wood, boat oil, and money. Expensive kayaks hung from the ceiling beams. A sitting area with leather couches faced a wall of windows overlooking the choppy, gray lake. Will stood there, his back to me, hands in the pockets of his tailored trousers. The picture of a man surveying his domain. Right on time, he said without turning. I appreciate punctuality. He turned slowly. He looked relaxed, in control. He wore a cashmere sweater over an open-collared shirt, the image of casual, confident power. His eyes swept over me, taking in my outfit, my posture, my face. He was looking for signs of strain, of desperation. I let him see a little. I kept my shoulders slightly slumped, my fingers clutching the strap of my clutch a little too tightly. You threatened my sister, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, letting it shake. A small, dismissive smile touched his lips, a nudge, to ensure we had this chat. Sit. It wasn't an invitation, it was an order. He gestured to the couch. I remained standing, near the door. I'm not staying long. You said you had an offer. His smile widened. It didn't reach his cold eyes. Always so transactional. Fine. Let's transact. You have something I want. Files. Data. Whatever scraps you managed to copy before you left. He began to pace slowly. A predator circling. I have something you need. Money. A significant amount. Enough to make your mother's new arrangements permanent. And enough left over for you to disappear. Start fresh somewhere. Portland, maybe. Or Austin. Somewhere less expensive. How much? I asked, injecting a greedy, hopeful note into my voice. He named a figure. It was substantial. It was also an insult. It was about what a mid-level executive might get as a severance, not the price of silencing a decade of fraud. I let out a short, bitter laugh. It wasn't entirely feigned. That's it. For what I have. You think this is about a buyout. Will, this is about what you did, what you're still doing. He stopped pacing, his head tilting. What I did. I saved your mother. I gave you a life you could only dream of. I took your father's crude little valve and turned it into a medical breakthrough. His tone hardened. You were a good investment for a while. Rachel, a charming accessory. But you became problematic, entitled. And now, you're stealing from me. The sheer, staggering arrogance of it stole my breath for a second. Iwa's stealing from him. The psychological pivot was masterful. He was rewriting history right in front of me. I'm not stealing, I said, my voice gaining a sliver of steel. I'm exposing. I know about Munich. A flicker in his eyes. Surprise. Quickly masked by irritation. Munich? What about it? A standard clinical trial. The data was incorporated. The data was buried. I shot back, taking a step forward. The adverse events, the rejections, the deaths you called underlying conditions. You cherry-picked the Boston results and shoved the rest into a black archive. You lied to the FDA. You're selling a defective product. He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw not anger, but a genuine, chilling recalculations. He was seeing me anew. The timid, grateful wife was gone. In her place was someone who knew his secrets. His expression shifted from annoyance to a kind of cold fascination. You've been busy, he murmured, snooping through my study, hacking servers. My IT people said there were attempts. I assumed it was a competitor, not my discarded wife playing spy. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Tell me, Rachel, did it make you feel powerful, knowing things you didn't understand? I understood enough, I said, holding his gaze. I understood that my father's name is on a device that's hurting people. I understood that you used me to get it. I understood that my mother's life was just a line item in your cost-benefit analysis. He shrugged, a casual, infuriating gesture. Business isn't charity. Your father was a brilliant engineer, but a naive idealist. He wanted to save the world. I wanted to build an empire. His design was the cornerstone. The Munich cohort was statistically acceptable risk. The greater good, Rachel, thousands have been helped by the valve. And the dozens who were harmed? The families of the 5 who died? My voice was rising now, the controlled veneer cracking to reveal the raw fury beneath. They're just acceptable risk. They're the cost of progress. He snapped, his composure finally slipping. He took a step toward me. You think medical innovation is clean? It's messy. It's brutal. You think the guys at the top of Pfizer or J&J lose sleep over every outlier in a phase 3 trial. Grow up. Your father's valve is extending lives. So what if a few are collateral damage? I was recording every vile word. I could almost feel the satisfaction emanating from the surveillance, van miles away. He was confessing, not to a jury, but to me, his supposed inferior. It was perfect. And marrying me? I asked, my voice dropping back to a deadly calm. Was that just collateral damage too? A necessary step to secure the patent? He looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw not the charming manipulator or the ruthless CEO, but something uglier, more contemptuous. You were convenient, he said flatly, pretty, presentable, broken by your father's death and your mother's illness. Grateful. I needed seamless, uncontested access to the Archer IP. A marriage was the simplest solution. It made you compliant. And it kept the fortune hunters and the press from asking why Sterling Medical was suddenly so interested in a dead man's notebook. He smiled again, a cruel twist of his lips. And you were so very grateful, weren't you? So eager to please. It was almost pathetic. The words were meant to eviscerate. 3 years ago, they would have. Now, they were just data points, confirming what I already knew. The last shred of anything I might have felt for this man. Pity, regret, even hatred. Dissolved into nothing. He was just a problem to be solved. So it was all a lie. I stated, needing him to say it for the record. Was the apartment a lie? The cars? The clothes? The funding for your mother's $1 million treatment? He countered, spreading his hands. You got exactly what you bargained for. Stability. Security. A name. You just wanted more. You wanted love. He spat the word like it was a joke. That was your mistake. This was never about love. It was a merger. And you, my dear, have been a hostile takeover target for some time now. He thought he'd laid me bare. He saw my stillness as defeat. He walked to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter. He held one out to me. I didn't take it. Here's the new deal, he said, sipping his drink, his confidence fully restored. You give me every copy of every file you have. You sign a new, comprehensive NDA, and in return, I won't have you prosecuted for industrial espionage, theft, and attempted extortion. You walk away with nothing, but you walk away. Your sister's career remains intact. Your mother, well, I can't promise her continued comfort, but I won't actively make it worse. He leaned closer, his voice a silken threat. That's more than you deserve. It's the only offer on the table. I looked at the glass in his hand, at the amber liquid catching the dull light from the window. I thought of my father, hunched over his workbench, driven by the simple desire to help. I thought of my mother, her spirit unbroken by disease. I thought of the names on the Munich trial roster that Jenna and Leo had shown me. Then I looked back at Will. The transformation in my posture was subtle but total. The slouch straightened. The nervous grip on my clutch relaxed. The fear drained from my eyes, replaced by a glacial calm. I saw the exact moment he noticed. His smug expression faltered. Just for a second. You're right, Will, I said, my voice clear and steady, echoing slightly in the boathouse. This was a transaction, a merger. I slowly, deliberately, unbuttoned the top button of my blouse and reached inside. His eyes followed the movement. A flicker of confusion and then dawning alarm as I didn't produce a hidden drive or a stack of papers, but instead touched the small, flesh-colored disc on my chest. My asset was access. I continued, my fingers moving to the camera button on my lapel, giving it a gentle tap. Your asset was information, and you just delivered a controlling share. His face went pale. What is that? What are you doing? You were so focused on whether I had files. You never stopped to consider how I got them. I said, taking a step toward him. He took an involuntary step back. The power dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. You talked about my father's naivete. Your mistake was your own arrogance. You thought I was too broken, too stupid, too grateful to see you for what you are. You thought your secrets were safe because you were the smartest man in the room. I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. You just confessed to fraud, to bribery, to negligent homicide, to entering a marriage under false pretenses for financial gain. You did it clearly, concisely, and with a stunning lack of remorse. And every word of it is currently being beamed to a secure server, with copies to the FBI, the Washington State Attorney General, and the Seattle Times. The glass of whiskey slipped from his fingers and shattered on the polished concrete floor. The sound was explosively loud in the silent room. His composure shattered with it. His eyes bulged, darting from my face to the tiny devices now visible on my clothing, to the windows, as if expecting agents to come swarming in. You bitch. He breathed, the words choked with rage and terror. You set me up. I gave you enough rope. I corrected him softly. You hung yourself. He lunged then, not at me, but for his phone on the sideboard. It was a primal, panicked move. He never reached it. The main door of the boathouse swung open, not with a crash, but with a firm, authoritative push. Two men in dark windbreakers, with FBI in bright yellow letters on the back, entered, followed by a woman in a severe pantsuit who I recognized from Marcus's dossiers as an assistant U.S. attorney. Two more agents flanked them. Will froze, his hand outstretched toward the phone, looking like a statue of guilty surprise. William Sterling III, the lead agent said, his voice neutral and professional. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, making false statements to the Food and Drug Administration, and related charges. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights became a dull buzz in the background. I didn't hear them. My eyes were locked with Will's. In his, I saw the total, cataclysmic collapse of his world. The disbelief, the fury, the raw, animal fear. The empire he'd built on my father's work and my compliance was crumbling around him, and he was powerless to stop it. The agents moved in, securing his hands behind his back with plastic cuffs. As they led him past me, he strained against their grip, his face contorted. This isn't over, he snarled, spittle flying from his lips. I have lawyers. You have nothing. It's my word against yours. You lying. It's your words against you. Will. I interrupted, my voice calm amidst his storm. All of them. On tape. Have a nice day. He was hauled out, his shouts fading into the sound of the wind off the lake. The attorney stayed behind for a moment, giving me a brief, respectful nod. Ms. Bennett, we'll be in touch. Your cooperation has been invaluable. Then she followed the agents out. The sudden silence in the boathouse was deafening. The adrenaline that had sustained me began to ebb, leaving a profound, trembling exhaustion in its wake. I walked to the wall of windows, watching as Will was put into the back of an unmarked sedan. The car drove away, disappearing up the wooded drive. It was over. The 3-year charade, the constant fear, the performance. I reached up and carefully peeled the microphone from my skin, unclipped the camera button. I held them in my palm, these tiny pieces of technology that had just toppled a giant. A strange, hollow feeling spread through my chest. Not joy, not triumph, just a vast, empty quiet. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was Marcus. I answered, bringing it to my ear. I didn't speak. Rachel? His voice was tight with concern. It's done, I whispered, the words feeling foreign. He said everything, more than we needed. A long exhale on the other end. We heard. We have it all. Clean, unambiguous. He's finished. A pause. Are you all right? I looked at my reflection in the rain-streaked glass. The woman looking back was pale, her eyes haunted but clear. The weight was still there, but it was different now. It was no longer the crushing weight of his lies, but the heavy, sobering weight of what came next. I will be, I said, and for the first time, I believed it. I'm coming home. I ended the call. I didn't look back at the boathouse, at the shattered glass on the floor, the empty whiskey glass. I walked out into the cool, damp air, towards my rental car. The rain had started again, a fine, misting drizzle. It felt like a baptism. Silence was a luxury I hadn't known in 3 years. Now, in the week after Will's arrest, it pressed in on me, thick and disorienting. The safe house felt like a decompression chamber. I had spent so long living at a high pitch of hidden purpose that its sudden absence left me untethered. I'd wake in the night, heart racing, ready for a fight that was already over. The calm was its own kind of trauma. The world outside, however, was a roaring typhoon. Will's perp walk did a grainy, glorious cell phone video of him in cuffs, his Tom Ford sweater rumpled, his face a mask of stunned fury that had gone viral. The Seattle Times broke the story under the headline Sterling's Fall. Fraud, deceit, and a wife's wire. My name was everywhere, but the narrative had flipped completely. I was no longer the gold-digging ex, but the whistleblower wife, the brave daughter who took down a medical tycoon. It was surreal, and it made my skin crawl. Marcus handled the initial media deluge, issuing a single, brief statement through a reputable PR firm he'd engaged. Ms. Bennett is focused on her mother's health and cooperating fully with authorities. She asks for privacy during this difficult time and will have no further comment on the ongoing legal proceedings. It was an elegant dam, holding back a flood of interview requests from every major network and glossy magazine. The first real test came in the form of a phone call from the U.S. Attorney's Office. It wasn't the AUSA from the boathouse, but her boss, a woman named Elizabeth Vance with a voice like ground glass and a reputation for winning. Ms. Bennett, we have the audio and video files from your device. Vance began. No small talk. They're compelling. Sterling's lawyers are already screaming about entrapment, but the context is clear. He initiated the meet. He made the threats. Your evidence provides the why behind the dry financial data. It makes the case human. And juries hate arrogant pricks who think they're above the law. I was on speakerphone in Marcus's temporary downtown office. He gave me a slight nod. I'm glad it's useful. I said, my voice steady. Useful is an understatement. It's the cornerstone. We're moving fast. A federal grand jury has been convened. We expect indictments on a dozen counts by the end of the week. Sterling Medical stock is in free fall. The board is in full panic, trying to distance themselves, offering up mid-level managers as sacrifices. She paused, which brings me to my next point. William Sterling's new legal team, Carson, is out. They've brought in the big guns from D.C., has approached us about a plea. My fingers tightened around the phone. A plea. They want a deal. He pleads guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud, pays a massive fine, serves maybe 18 months in a minimum security club fed. The more serious charges, the ones related to the FDA submissions and the Munich incidents, that would be dropped. In return, he cooperates, provides evidence against the board members who approved the cover-up, and she let the word hang. He is prepared to offer you a substantial, separate financial settlement, a true settlement, 8 figures, tax-free, in exchange for your testimony being limited and a full civil release. 8 figures. For a moment, the number hung in the air, shimmering with possibility. It was more money than I could comprehend. It would guarantee my mother a lifetime of not just care, but luxury. It would set Chloe up for life. It would buy me absolute freedom. Marcus was watching me closely, his expression unreadable. What do you want me to do? I asked Vance. Buying time. That's not my call to make, she said, though her tone implied she had a preference. My job is to put dangerous people away and secure justice for victims. A trial is a risk. Juries are unpredictable. A guilty plea is a sure thing, but the sentence would be light, very light, considering the scope. The financial offer to you is, frankly, a bribe, a very elegant one. It's meant to make you go away and let the public story become about complex corporate fraud, not about the man who married for a patent and left people to die. Left people to die. The words cut through the fog of the number. I saw the redacted names on Jenna's screen. The families in Munich who'd been told their loved ones died of an infection, not a device failure. And if I say no? I asked, my voice quiet. Then we go to trial. We use every piece of evidence. We put you on the stand. We put his victims' families on the stand. It will be brutal for everyone. The media circus will be endless. Your life and your family's lives will be dissected in public for months. And there is a chance, however small, that his billion-dollar legal team could find a crack, could confuse a jury, could get him off on the most serious charges. The risk is yours. I looked at Marcus. His gaze was steady. He wouldn't tell me what to do. This was my choice, my line in the sand. Ms. Vance, I said, the words forming with a certainty that surprised me. Thank you for the information. Please convey this response to Mr. Sterling's attorneys. Through official channels, I took a deep breath. We are not interested in a plea deal that minimizes his responsibility for the harm caused. We are not interested in his money. Our position is, and will remain, full cooperation with your office for a prosecution on all available charges. We want a trial. We want the truth, all of it, to come out in open court. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a faint, almost imperceptible sound that might have been a sigh of respect. I'll relay the message. Counsel will be in touch about your grand jury appearance. Good day, Ms. Bennett. I hung up. My hands were trembling. I had just turned down a fortune and opted for a war. Marcus finally smiled, a real, deep smile that reached his eyes. He offered you the one thing he thought you wanted, the one thing he values above all else, money, and you handed it back to him. It was never about the money, I said, the truth of it settling into my bones. It was about making it stop, making him stop. Now, Marcus said, his tone turning practical, we prepare for the spotlight you just invited. The controlled statement won't hold forever. You'll need to make a public appearance, not an interview, a statement, on your terms. He was right. The narrative was mine to shape now, but it was a fragile thing. I needed to own it, or someone else would. That weekend, Chloe flew in. She came through the safe house door, dropped her bag, and just stared at me. The New York bravado was gone. She looked younger, older, all at once, without a word. She crossed the room and wrapped me in a crushing hug. I held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with airplane air. You idiot, she mumbled into my shoulder, her voice thick. You glorious, terrifying idiot. I saw the news. I heard the clips. He really said all that? All of it, I whispered. She pulled back, her hands on my shoulders, her eyes searching my face. You could have taken the money. After everything he did, no one would have blamed you. I would have blamed me, I said simply. Dad would have blamed me. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry for what I said on the phone, for not seeing it, for being so wrapped up in my own crap that I didn't see you were drowning. You weren't supposed to see, I said, wiping a tear from her cheek. That was the point. My job was to be the strong big sister. I just got lost in the part for a while. We spent the day talking, really talking. I told her more about the 3 years of quiet terror, about the shadow team, about the patients in Munich. She listened, her horror giving way to a fierce, protective pride. The rift between us, built on my lies of omission, began to mend, not with a dramatic snap, but with the steady, patient work of shared truth. The following Tuesday, I stood in a small, neutral conference room in Marcus's building. A single podium, no fanfare. Marcus had allowed a pool of 3 reporters, point one from the Times, 1 from the AP, 1 from a local TV station. No questions, just a statement. I approached the podium, my notes in hand. I didn't need them. The words were etched into me. The cameras clicked. I felt a wave of nausea, the ghost of the woman who'd trembled in Hargrove's bar. But beneath it was the new bedrock. I was not a victim giving a statement. I was a witness giving testimony. Thank you for coming. I began, my voice clear in the quiet room. For the last 3 years, my life was not my own. It was a performance orchestrated by William Sterling, a man who saw my family's tragedy as a business opportunity and my father's life-saving work as a commodity to be exploited, regardless of the human cost. I spoke for 5 minutes. I talked about my father's ideals. I talked about my mother's illness being used as a leash. I did not divulge evidence, but I named the sin, the deliberate concealment of the truth about the Archer valve. I looked directly into the camera lens. This is not a story of revenge. It is a story of accountability. My cooperation with the Department of Justice will continue. There will be no private settlements, no silenced victims in exchange for comfort. The people who were harmed by Sterling Medical's actions deserve their day in court. The public deserves to know how a system meant to protect patients was manipulated for profit. I will have no further comment. Thank you. I stepped away from the podium. There was a moment of silence. Then a flurry of shouted questions I ignored as Marcus guided me out. The performance was over. The real work at the legal marathon. The painful process of testifying. The life after that was just beginning. But for the first time, I was walking toward it as myself. Rachel Bennett, not a Sterling, not a victim. A woman who had looked into the abyss, and instead of falling in, had learned to build a bridge. It was a shaky bridge, over a chasm that still terrified me. But it was mine, and I was finally on the other side. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle felt like a temple of polished stone and hushed. Anxious energy. For 6 weeks, it had been my second home. The air inside was a sterile mix of old paper, floor wax, and simmering tension. I sat at the prosecution table, back straight, hands folded in my lap. The cream-colored suit I wore was armor, chosen by Marcus and a discreet stylist. You need to look credible, not vengeful. He'd said, the jury needs to see a woman of substance, not a scorned wife. I felt neither. I felt like a vessel, emptied of everything but the facts I had to carry. Across the aisle, flanked by a phalanx of 3 dark-suited attorneys who cost more per hour than most people made in a month, sat Will. He looked diminished in his expensive but somber suit. The arrogant glow was gone, replaced by a taut, watchful stillness. He spent most of his time writing on a legal pad, occasionally leaning to whisper to his lead counsel, a famously ruthless litigator named Alan Crutchfield, who had a smile like a shark and a voice like gravel. The trial was a brutal, methodical dismantling. The prosecution, led by Elizabeth Vance, was relentless. They presented the dry, damning financials, the hidden Cayman accounts, the inflated billing, the payments to the Boston trial investigator that looked suspiciously like bribes. They called expert witnesses who dissected the manipulated FDA submissions. It was complex, dry stuff, and I could see the jury's eyes glaze over at times. Then, they called me. A ripple went through the courtroom as I stood and walked to the witness stand. I could feel Will's gaze, a physical pressure between my shoulder blades. I took the oath, my voice steady. Vance approached, her demeanor professional, but with a subtle undertone of guidance. Ms. Bennett, let's start at the beginning. How did you meet the defendant? And so, I told the story, not the story of a love affair, but the story of a predation. I spoke of my father's death, my mother's diagnosis, Will's sudden, convenient appearance as a savior. I described the whirlwind courtship, the pressure, the promise of lifelong care for my mother. I kept my tone factual, unemotional. I was a historian recounting a conquest. And after you were married, Vance asked, did you notice any changes in William Sterling's behavior towards you? Objection. Calls for speculation. Crutchfield droned, not even looking up. Sustained. The judge said. Vance rephrased. Did your access to shared financial information change after the marriage? Yes, I said. He encouraged me to let his financial advisors manage my inheritance from my father. He said it was too complicated for me. I signed the papers. And did your social life change? I was discouraged from seeing old friends. He said they were bad influences or didn't fit our new life. My job was frowned upon. I eventually quit. Vance led me through it all. The isolation, the control. The night I overheard the phone call about the Munich data. And what did you understand from that conversation? She asked. I understood that my husband had knowingly concealed dangerous flaws in my father's medical device. I said, looking directly at the jury. A few of them met my gaze. I understood that my mother's health care was a tool to ensure my compliance. And I understood that the man I'd married was a stranger. Then came the audio, the recording from the boathouse. Vance played the key excerpts. Will's voice, cool and contemptuous, filled the silent courtroom. You were a good investment for a while. Rachel, a charming accessory. The Munich cohort was statistically acceptable risk. The greater good, they're the cost of doing business. You were convenient, pretty, presentable, broken. A marriage was the simplest solution. Hearing it here, in this public, solemn space, was even more chilling than hearing it live. The naked calculation, the utter lack of humanity. I didn't look at Will. I watched the jury. I saw the disgust on their faces, the dawning comprehension. The dry financial fraud was one thing. This cold-hearted exploitation of a grieving family, that was something they could feel. Crutchfield's cross-examination was a calculated assault. He tried to paint me as a schemer, a woman scorned who had meticulously crafted a revenge plot. Isn't it true, Ms. Bennett, that you secretly recorded your husband because you were angry about the divorce settlement, that you felt you deserved more? I recorded him, I said calmly, because I had evidence he had committed federal crimes, and I believed he would destroy that evidence if confronted. You believed. So it was a presumption, a guess. It was a conclusion based on 3 years of observing his character. I countered, my voice even. A conclusion he confirmed when he threatened my sister's career to force a meeting. He sneered. This shadow team you assembled, the hackers, the former FBI agent, quite an operation for a simple graphic designer. You expect this jury to believe you orchestrated this entire sting because you suddenly developed a moral conscience? I paused, letting his insinuation hang in the air. I looked at the jury, then back at him. I didn't develop a conscience, Mr. Crutchfield. I finally found my voice, and I used every tool at my disposal to make sure it was heard. He shifted tactics, attacking my credibility, my motives, even hinting at an unstable mental state due to the stress of my mother's illness. I answered every question with a flat, unshakable truth. The fury I'd once felt was gone, burned away in the boathouse. What remained was a granite certainty. By the time I stepped down, my legs were weak, but my resolve was stronger than ever. The defense put on its case. They called character witnesses who spoke of Will's philanthropy. They called a paid expert who tried to muddy the waters on the clinical trial data, talking about statistical anomalies and regulatory gray areas. Crutchfield put Will on the stand at a risky move. Will was coached to perfection. He was contrite, framing his actions as overzealous pursuit of innovation for patients, a man who deferred too much to subordinates. He looked at the jury with practiced sincerity and expressed deep regret for any pain caused to Rachel and her family. But Vance tore him apart on cross-examination. She walked him, step by step, through emails he'd signed, memos he'd approved. She played more of the boathouse tape, where his regret was notably absent. She forced him to admit he knew about the Munich data discrepancies before the FDA submission, and you chose not to disclose them, correct? I believed the Boston data was representative. That wasn't my question. Mr. Sterling, did you, or did you not, knowingly withhold the adverse event data from the Munich cohort from the Food and Drug Administration? Will hesitated, his eyes darting to his lawyers. The submission followed the legal guidance of the time. Yes or no, Mr. Sterling? A long, damning pause. We presented the data we believed was most relevant. It was as close to an admission as she would get, and the jury didn't miss it. The closing arguments were a study in contrast. Crutchfield spoke of reasonable doubt, of complex business decisions misunderstood, of a marriage breakdown fueling a vindictive campaign. He painted me as the mastermind, Will as the flawed but fundamentally decent man caught in my web. Elizabeth Vance stood before the jury, calm and formidable. She didn't raise her voice. She simply held up the evidence. "This case is not complex," she said. "It is about a simple choice. William Sterling had a choice: tell the truth and protect patients, or tell a lie and protect his profits. He chose the lie. He built his empire on that lie. He entered a marriage to secure that lie. And when his wife discovered the truth, he threatened her and her family to cover that lie. She pointed at Will. That man believed he was above the law, that he was smarter than everyone else, that people were tools to be used and discarded. You have the power to show him he was wrong." The jury was out for 3 days. They were the longest days of my life. I didn't go to the courthouse. I stayed in the safe house with Chloe, who had moved in temporarily. We didn't talk much. We cooked simple meals, watched bad TV, and waited. Marcus called with updates that were no updates at all. "They're deliberating. It's a good sign. It means they're taking it seriously." On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the call came. A verdict had been reached. The walk back into the courtroom felt like walking to the gallows or the guillotine. My future, Will's future, hung on the foreperson's next words. The air was electric. Will sat rigidly, his face pale. His parents were in the front row, their expressions stony. The jury filed in. None of them looked at Will. "Madam, foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor. On count 1, conspiracy to commit wire fraud." "How do you find?" "Guilty." A gasp, quickly stifled, ran through the room. Will flinched as if struck. "On count 2, securities fraud." "How do you find?" "Guilty." On count 3, making false statements to the Food and Drug Administration. "Guilty." On count 4, "Guilty." It went on, count after count, a relentless, rhythmic hammering. "Guilty, guilty, guilty." With each one, Will seemed to shrink into his chair. The arrogant billionaire was gone, replaced by a convicted felon. His mother buried her face in her hands. His father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. When it was over, the judge set a sentencing date and remanded Will into custody. As the marshals approached to take him away, he finally turned his head. His eyes found mine across the crowded room. There was no hatred there anymore, no fury, just a hollow, bewildered shock. The master of his universe had just seen it annihilated by the very system he'd thought he controlled. He didn't understand how this had happened. He never would. I held his gaze for a moment, then gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a nod of triumph, but of finality. Checkmate. Then I turned and walked out of the courtroom. Chloe on one side, Marcus on the other. The flashbulbs erupted. Reporters shouting questions. Marcus held up a hand, shielding me. No comment at this time. We pushed through the scrum into the relative quiet of the hallway. I leaned against the cool marble wall, my knees finally giving way. Chloe put an arm around me. "You did it, Ratch," she whispered, her own voice thick with tears. "You actually did it." 6 months later, the sentencing hearing was a formality. Will's team threw everything at the judge. Appeals for leniency, charity work, his otherwise blameless life. Elizabeth Vance argued for the maximum, citing the egregious breach of public trust and the very real human cost. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened impassively. "William Sterling III," she finally said, peering over her glasses. "You orchestrated a fraud that endangered public health for profit. You manipulated federal regulators. You exploited personal tragedy for corporate gain. You have shown no genuine remorse, only regret at being caught." She paused. "The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison." The number hung in the air. It was near the maximum. It meant he would be an old man when he got out. His empire was in ashes, his name a synonym for greed. It was over. The restitution and civil settlements were astronomical. Sterling Medical was dissolved. its assets sold to pay fines and settlements to the victims' families. A separate, massive settlement came to me, not as a bribe, but as court-ordered compensation for fraud, emotional distress, and the theft of my father's intellectual property. It was more money than the plea deal had offered. It was blood money, but it was also seed money. I didn't keep it, not for myself. The sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of a new, airy office space in downtown Seattle. The brass plaque on the door read, "The Robert Archer Foundation for Medical Ethics Innovation." The launch party was in full swing. It wasn't a grand, flashy affair. It was a gathering of doctors, researchers, ethicists, patient advocates, and a few carefully vetted journalists. My mother, Eleanor, was there in her wheelchair, beaming, her condition stabilized by a new, non-Sterling funded therapy. Chloe flitted through the crowd, the life of the party, finally free of the shadow that had hung over our family. Marcus, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him, clinked a glass for attention. The room quieted. "We're not here just to celebrate a new foundation," he began, his voice warm. "We're here to celebrate a reclamation. The work of a brilliant man, Robert Archer, was hijacked by greed. Today, we reclaim his legacy for its original purpose: to heal, not to harm, to innovate with integrity, not cut corners for profit." He turned to me. "The woman who made this possible, she'd prefer I not sing her praises. So I'll just say, Rachel, your father would be incredibly proud." He handed me the microphone, a flutter of nerves. Old ghosts, but I pushed them down. I looked out at the room. The people who believed in something bigger than a bottom line. "Thank you, Marcus, and thank you all for being here," I said, my voice clear. "This foundation has two goals. First, to be a watchdog. We will fund independent audits of clinical trial data, advocate for stronger transparency laws, and provide legal support for whistleblowers in the medical technology field. Second, to be a catalyst. We will provide grants to researchers like my father. Brilliant, passionate people who might not have the resources or the ruthless instincts to navigate a system that sometimes rewards the wrong things." I saw nods of agreement, smiles of support. My father used to say that trust was the most important component in any device meant for the human body. This foundation is about rebuilding that trust. One project, one policy, one person at a time. Later, as the party wound down, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. Chloe came up beside me, handing me a glass of champagne. "To Dad," she said softly. "To Dad," I echoed, clinking her glass. "You know," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "For a while there, I thought he'd won. That guys like him always win." So did I admitted, the memory of that fear, still a faint echo. But they only win if we believe the game is only about their kind of power. Money, influence, intimidation. I looked at the room behind us, at the doctors debating, the advocates planning, my mother laughing with Marcus. We changed the game. A man approached us, one of the grant applicants, a young bioengineer with a prototype for a low-cost prosthetic valve. He was passionate, his eyes alight with the same idealistic fire my father had possessed. We talked for 20 minutes. I wasn't playing a part. I wasn't hiding. I was just me, listening, asking questions, believing in his work. After he moved on, Chloe looked at me, a smirk playing on her lips. "So, what now, boss lady? You've taken down a corporate giant and started a philanthropic empire. Kind of a hard act to follow." I smiled, a real, unburdened smile that felt foreign but wonderful on my face. "Now," I said, watching the first stars appear over the sound. "Now I think I'll just live my life. See what happens next." The future was no longer a tightrope over an abyss. It was an open road, and for the first time in years, I was excited to see where it led. The woman in the reflection of the dark window was someone I recognized. She was Rachel Archer Bennett, and she was finally, completely, free.